So to get going, to begin, today's first presenter is Rod Basler. Rod has been the North Dakota State Water Commission GIS coordinator since 2001, along with prior experience as a GIS manager at Cattermas, Lee, and Jackson, the North Dakota Geological Survey, and the Kansas Geological Survey. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in Cartography and Physical Geography from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in 1988, with graduate studies at the University of Kansas. 26 of his 30-plus years of experience have been in North Dakota on a wide range of projects, including airport development and modeling, transportation, county data development, environmental monitoring and modeling, and utility mapping. Most of his experience has been related to geosciences, particularly in water-related topics. He has played an active role in the development of GIS across North Dakota by sitting on the state's GIS Technical Committee for 23 years and is the North Dakota steward for the USGS's National Hydrographic Dataset, as well as many of the base data layers on the NDGIS hub. The North Dakota State Water Commission's map services that he manages are the largest in the state, delivering the most comprehensive water data in the upper Midwest. The map services include survey plats and notes, Lidar elevation data, and historical maps and air photos. And now I'll hand the microphone over to Rod for his presentation.
Okay, thanks, Ethan. Good afternoon. I'm guessing there are some in this audience that are kind of wondering why the Water Commission would be presenting data at a DOT conference. Well, in the fall of 2019, I got a call from the DOT asking about one of our map services. I think it was the Lidar service, if I remember right. And they were surprised that we had the service, and when they started asking around the DOT about it, they discovered there were people that knew about it, and others that didn't have any clue as to what we offered. So they asked if they could meet with us, and they came down and met with us, and we showed them the Lidar service, and I asked them if they were aware of any of our other services. And by the time I was done talking and showing them our other map services, I was asked to present at this conference. Since most of these services have been around for about the last 15 plus years, I'm guessing that the vast majority of you know about some or maybe all of these services, or maybe you caught my last presentation at the State GIS conference. But I assure you that the data services you'll find here are not purely for GIS geeks. We've designed them so the professional in the office can get to the data they need quickly and easily, or I've had 75-year-old farmers using laptops on their kitchen table to find answers to the questions they have. The Water Commission has been collecting water data for over 100 years, and as it stands right now, we have over 1,000 terabytes, or for you IT people, 1 petabyte of storage dedicated to our data sets. To put that into perspective, most basic home computers now come with maybe 1 or 2 terabytes of storage. So I've got a lot to cover, and so no sleeping out there, and I'll get started. The Water Commission has 5 primary public-facing map services. We have a general map service. We have a survey and benchmark map service. We have our Lidar dissemination map service. We have a historic map and aerial photography map service. And we have a risk assessment map service. The first map service that I'll review is the general map service. This map is really ugly, and it seems like it has a lot of stuff on it, but this is actually only about half of what you'll find on the general map service. The general map service includes over 70,000 commercial well drillers logs, over 38,000 water data sites, both surface and subsurface. The vast majority is subsurface. We have over 22,000 permits in the system. We have about 20,000 dams, dikes, drains, diversions, dugouts, and restorations, 1,600 water depots, and 609 USGS gauges. If we look at one data layer, for example, the driller's logs, we can turn them on by opening the folder for the water resources and check the box next to the driller's logs as shown by the red arrow here. And in order to query the data behind the point, will then make the driller's logs the active layer with the active layer pull down in the upper right corner. Once it's the active layer, the identify button will show as active and you can click on any single point. The buttons to the right of it allow you to grab a group of points by box or polygon. You can choose points based on attributes such as what county you're looking for or an aquifer, or you can simply grab random points on the map to get access to the data. So once it's selected, in this case, the log record will come up and it will show you general information about it, but it also has an associated PDF file that you can open up and get the scanned document that's sent into us for that well. So here we can see that the commercial well driller has a description of where it's at, the casing type, the pipe diameter, it has screening intervals in it, it has static water levels. When they tested it, it has pumping rates and has lithology as well. So for example, I used this service when I was looking to build my house, and I looked at several of the wells around my house location to see how deep they had to go to water and what kind of pumping rates they were getting, so I could determine whether or not it was worth it for me to try and put in a well. Another data set that we use extensively is the water data sites with over 38,000 points. Like I said before, this includes both surface and subsurface data. Each point has a basic description of the water use, the depth of the well, screened intervals, lithology. This is our primary scientific database with data going back over 100 years. If you note at the bottom of the record on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there's 3 links. One to display a hydrograph for the selected well, one to show historic water levels for this well, and water chemistry samples taken at various times in the well's life. These links will not be active for all of the wells, but some of the wells do have a combination, either all of them or some combination of those 3. And by clicking on those links, you can bring up a hydrograph, or you can bring up the historic water levels for that well, or take a look at the water chemistry for that well. In addition to what I've just shown you, we also include maps of irrigability, water depots, water permits. We also have our structures database, which I mentioned before, which includes things like dams and dikes and drains. We have river miles on all the major rivers. We have elevation contours across the state, including Lidar contours where they're available. Last fall, we added in the aquatic nuisance species layer, which is fed directly by North Dakota Game and Fish. So when they make changes to their data set, it's shown live here. We've even included the soils layer across the state, and also of course have our aquifers on the map. All of these layers are used in our daily operations in all of our agency divisions to make regulatory and scientific decisions. There are over 148,000 data points in this service alone. This doesn't include the associated data with these points, like the scans on the driller's logs or historic water levels, of which there's over 11 million. Water chemistry analyses, there's 85,000 of those, and lithologic logs, and there's almost 250,000 of those as well. We also have maps showing precip data from over 3,500 recording sites across the state, covering the years of 1977 through 2020. This comes from our Atmospheric Resource Board, which is within the Water Commission. They include annual summaries and precipitation by growing season months as well. We also have snow water equivalent maps every spring since 2009. This aids in our assessments of water potential across the state. Some of our higher tech data includes aerial electromagnetic surveys used for our aquifer studies. These are used in aquifer studies to better define the aquifers of the state and their size and dimensions. And about 3,000 square miles have been collected over the last several years. So that's it for our general map service. On to the second one, which is our survey and benchmark map service. This is our oldest map service, and it's getting a little long in the tooth, probably in need of an upgrade. Some of you might not be familiar with why we would have this service, so a little background is necessary. Back in 1783, Congress needed a simple way to transfer ownership of all our new lands to the west to private owners. The Land Ordinance of 1785 did that through the establishment of the U.S. Public Land Survey System, or the system that many refer to as the Township and Range System. So they sent out surveyors from the General Land Office to survey the townships and the fractional subdivisions that we know as sections and quarter sections. In North Dakota, these initial surveys were completed anywhere from the 1850s through the 1920s. Resurveys of areas across the state have been conducted ever since. So unless you're already familiar with the service, you're probably asking yourself, what has this got to do with the State Water Commission? Well, as we all know or should know, the director of the State Water Commission is also the state engineer. And according to North Dakota Century Code, the state engineer shall be custodian of all plats, field notes, and records that have been or hereafter may be turned over to the state by the government. What are these plats and why are they important? Well, a General Land Office plat is the drawing which represents the lines surveyed, established, retraced, or resurveyed, showing the direction and length of each line, the relation to the adjoining official surveys, the boundaries, description, and area of each parcel of land, and as far as practicable, the topography, culture, and improvements within the limits of the survey. Occasionally, the plat may constitute the entire record of survey. So in a nutshell, they are the basis for all defined parcels of land. The data displayed on these plats and their associated notes comprise the majority of points of beginning or a reference system for all surveys. The Water Commission recognized the deterioration of our paper plats and the associated scans of surveys kept on photographic film. So in 2002, we undertook an effort to preserve these documents before they were lost. We scanned approximately 3,000 General Land Office plats and their associated over 10,000 associated survey notes. We looked for a little guidance on what the best method would be for scanning, and we went to the Library of Congress to see how they were doing things and found that they scanned many of their antique maps at 300 dots per inch. So it seemed like a reasonable starting point. A resolution of 300 dots per inch produced output of the original, on a plotter that looked almost exactly like the original. If we went up to 400 dots per inch, the file sizes got extremely big without a lot of improvement to the scan. So what this means in reality is the scale of most of these maps is 1 to 31,000, or about a half mile to the inch. At this scale, 1 dot or pixel in the image represents 9 feet on the map. Additionally, the thickness of most of the line work is about 0.05 inches on the map. That means that each line on the ground would be 132 feet wide. So it should be clear that these are just representations of the townships and should not be afforded any graphical accuracy other than the important information that's plotted on them. We wanted everybody to be able to easily download and view these images with no special software or proprietary formats. Remember the 75-year-old farmer at his table trying to look at a survey plat. While space was a consideration, maintaining the quality of the images was a top priority. The next step that we needed to accomplish was the geo-registration of the images so we could get them into the map service and so you could bring them into your mapping services. And then we were able to design a map service around them for easily finding the info that you're looking for. This is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When we started, we had both paper and scanned film survey notes, the ability to link up with the National Geodetic Survey's benchmark data sheets, and we had many of the original or close to original paper plats. What you see here is Lee Krein holding an example of one of our original plats. You can tell that it's old, it's curled. If you could touch it, the paper's brittle. Lee actually wore out 3 large format scanners scanning in all of these plats. Here's an example of the handwritten notes, which remind me of my mother's own chicken scratching, which I was never able to interpret when I was 15, and a National Geodetic Survey data sheet for a benchmark that comes right from their website. Before we started this service, we had people coming in on a daily basis looking for copies of notes and plats. So you can imagine that running through the film and running these paper copies through scanners and to get prints was taking quite a toll on them. Both the paper and the film copies were becoming very brittle with age, and in fact our film is now sitting at state archives in their refrigerator to try and preserve it as long as possible. Now with this service, I get a question about once every 3 months, and I'd say that's a pretty good definition of a self-service operation. So anywhere you can get connected to the internet, you can find our data. Whether it's a surveyor in the field, an engineer needing to look at a photo during a meeting when he's in Canada, or you may want to look up an old family farm at a reunion. The navigation tools are in the upper right. You can put in a specific township number to zoom to that township. The benchmarks are on the map as well. And here I've highlighted a plat to view, where you can simply click on the thumbnail and the associated survey note PDFs. This is a typical GLO plat just south of Bismarck. At the bottom of the plat, you can, excuse me, at the bottom of the plat, you can see that the survey was made official by the Surveyor General's Office, Yankton, Dakota Territory, February of 1873. On the right are tables that show the meander line measures along the Missouri River. You can also note the lengths of the sections written in chains on the section lines. History buffs might note the location of Burley City, or genealogists might be looking for the Fred Hollenbach place to the east of Burley City. Again, this is an example of the original handwritten notes. We also have benchmarks that can be found by clicking on the benchmark tab at the top. This is where we need to do some upgrading, but note the benchmark on the map that you're interested in, and then find it in the table. Click on the link there, and you'll get further information on that location, either a National Geodetic Survey benchmark data sheet or whatever data sheet we have available for it. So on to our Lidar Map Service. Back in the early 2000s, we were starting to get more and more Lidar data. We decided early on that since we were collecting data that the public tax dollars had paid for, that we should make every bit of it easily accessible through an internet map service. This was also intended to save us a lot of time in distributing the many data sets that we were collecting. So, is this your large data storage and dissemination system? Well, surprisingly, if you talk to many other states, this is what they are relying on, risking millions of dollars of data on external drives, maybe stored in a cabinet somewhere with a sign-out list, but no easy way to quickly find the data you want and get it into your system or query it. It dumbfounds me that people will spend millions of dollars on LiDAR collection with no plan for storage or dissemination later. What I wanted was a system that would be designed for professionals to find their data quickly, easily, and have it delivered as fast as the internet would allow. So here's our map service. On the left, you'll be able to find all the latest projects. I have a lot more historical projects that I haven't got in here yet, but this list comprises the latest and greatest available in the state. So clicking on the gray area will show the tiles and the extent of the project in purple. If you click on the little I button for that project, you will get a project summary, including the collection specifications at a glance, along with links to download the index by itself or the detailed metadata zip file, which contains control information, surveyed points, etc. You can click anywhere on the map at any scale, whether at the statewide level or if you zoom in to look at a particular location. You can click with the info button to get elevations along with the data associated with the tile of the data you clicked within. Note the info locations on the map around the ranch with their associated elevation information on the left. So selecting your data is easy with the Begin Choosing Tiles button. You can draw a box to select your data, whether you're at the statewide level or zoomed all the way in. Select with a point, and then you'd put in a radius to select an area. You can draw an irregularly shaped polygon. You can select based on another feature like a county or a watershed or a park or a city. Or you may want the data for an entire project. You can do that, select all you want, unlike other services, there are no limits to what you can select and download. Once you've made your selection, you'll be presented with the project or projects that your area of interest encompasses. So in this example, the area of interest is covering 2 different projects. So if you click on the download arrow for each project, you'll be asked what type of data you want to download. So in this case, you can download ASCII grids, you can download intensity images, you can download an Imagine DEM, or you can download the original LAS files. You can click all of them, one of them, or any combination thereof. You'll then be presented with your data download screen. You can click on the links to download your data individually. Probably only being practical if you have a couple of tiles. Or you can use the FTP service with the associated credentials to download your data. Your data is ready for immediate download and will sit available on our servers for about 2 weeks. You also might want to check the status of our current collects using the status button in the upper right corner of the map. Clicking on the info button for the project will give you a metadata summary of the project. So now we move on to another data resource that the Water Commission recognized as expensive data that needed renewed life and public access. About 2004, 2005, with the success we had with the GLO and Survey Notes archival project, we started looking around at another resource that was being underutilized in the office. We had literally thousands of photos that had been collected for various projects over the last 70 years, but few were easily accessible or even known resources. Everybody immediately thinks the newest data is the most valuable, but this isn't always the case. So here are the technical specs we followed. The final product needed to be equal in quality to the originals. 900 dots per inch will supposedly maintain the original quality of whatever you scan. Most of ours has been scanned at 1200 dots per inch. We didn't want to have to go back and do photos over again. We were collecting data, photos from the NRCS, and so once we pulled them out of the office, we wanted to scan them once and get them back to them. Some of these photos are really old. We didn't want to run them through the scanner any more than we had to. And again, it's easier to resample than to rescan. We used industry standard file formats. We didn't want any special proprietary formats, so you can open it with whatever software you have on whatever computer you own. While space was a consideration, we wanted to maintain the quality of the images. That was our top priority. All the photos should be georeferenced so that we can easily find the photos for geographic areas, use them in our GIS mapping systems to use. And for the 9-inch photography that has the fiducial marks and the borders and the altimeters and the clocks, we wanted to maintain 2 versions of those. One we would clip so that we could loosely mosaic them on our map service. The other was the original. Since we were only georeferencing with about 4 points just so we could get them to drop where they were geographically, we thought some people may want to take that further and use specialized software to nail them down tighter. So we provide the original photos so that they can take those and do that if they think it's necessary. We are also now including historical maps for the service, so you can compare the air photos to the maps we have. And in the last 6 months, we've started adding our own drone footage to the maps as well. And we've put together WMS services for the photos that you see in the map service so you can bring them into your mapping systems. We scanned about over 50,000 paper photos from over 300 Water Commission photography collects. They basically range from about 1938 to 2020. We have 500,000 NRCS slides of every section, pretty much every section east of the Missouri River for every year between 1981 and 2002. We're just getting started on trying to register them, but it takes a lot of time. We had 53 county collects that were scanned from film by the FSA. The North Dakota GIS Technical Committee paid for that. The Water Commission registered them. We wanted them in the shortest period of time, covering the whole state, and that ended up being 1957 to 1962. Most of the resolutions on the photos range from a 2-meter resolution all the way down to 3-inch resolution, with most of them being about 18 inches in resolution. The files are industry standard formats, again, to make sure that anybody and everybody can actually download the photos and look at them without any special software. We tried to maintain the quality as best we could. Some of the photos that we had had chicken scratching on them from delineating soils or things like that. If we happen to find duplicate photos that don't have that, we'll scan them and put them in instead, but we wanted to make sure we had everything out there that was available. And we have over 600 terabytes of space dedicated to just this one map service. We've geo-registered over 100,000 of these photos for use in our GIS and map services. The NRCS and state archives have provided a lot of these photos. The NRCS was so tickled with our services that they actually dedicated 2 people to doing nothing but registering photos and bringing photos into us to include in our system. And of course, we designed an internet map service with access 24/7 with probably over 150,000 photos now, all available for viewing and downloading. So here's our map. You may be wondering why it's a little off center. Well, it's off center because we're showing you the extent of everything we have in our system. And we have a collective 2011 flood photography that runs from Fort Peck Lake in Montana all the way down to Sioux City, Iowa on the Missouri River that shows maximum flood extents. On the left, by default, you'll see all the projects in your current map extent. Note that the slider bar there is showing a long list of projects available in the current map extent. The search box will allow you to search on project names. Project names are typically where is it, the year, the type of photography, and modifiers, so you can search on any of those things. So you might see a BW at the end, which indicates it's black and white photography, or you might see flood in the name, or DRN, which indicates it's a drone flight, or maps that indicate it's a map. There's also a transparency slider that we recently added that's just below that search box. So you can turn on the transparency and see how it looks over our Lidar derived shaded relief, which is kind of interesting to look at. You can see what's available by zooming in and by using your viewing map extent, or you can drag a box or click a point on the map. You can select based on features such as counties or cities, or by drawing an irregularly shaped polygon on the map. The navigation tools for zooming and panning are all right here. And you might want to take note of the lower left corner where the scale box is. Once you get zoomed in on the photo beyond a scale of 1 to 5,000, the date of the photograph will appear over the photos, and we put in the exact date if it was available for the photos, so that's kind of nice, especially on the older stuff. So now we've zoomed in on a little Missouri, and I did this to illustrate that when you zoom in with the map extent, you can see by the slider bar that the number of projects has gone down considerably, just because it's only grabbing projects that appear in the window you're looking at. If you click on a project, either the tiles for the project will show up or the photos themselves will start to show up. If you see tiles, keep zooming in, and at about a scale of 1 to 50,000, the actual photos will start to show up. In the last few weeks, we upgraded our servers and our storage, so now I'm able to make pyramids to have most of the photos show up immediately as soon as you get in, as soon as you click on them and turn on them, but some of them are still showing tiles until I get to them and get them updated. The yellow magnifying glass will allow you to zoom to the full extent of the project. And if you click the information button, you'll get a metadata file about the photos and the collect. And since I'm kind of a one-man band on this, I haven't got metadata on all of the projects. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to give me a call and ask me for more details about a project. We also have maps. This is from an 1895 USGS topographic map. If we click again on another project, that will draw. So let's see the 1941 projects for Fargo, or maybe the 1961 or 62 Air Force reconnaissance photos, or maybe compare those 1962 photos to the USDA 1962 photos. Or you could click on the 2018 Fargo 6-inch photography, or click the CIR button for the 2018 photography. And here's the button in case you were wondering where that was. So how about some more maps, like the General Land Office plats up by Garrison Dam, done in the, I believe, 1870s. I can't remember what these are for sure. Or the 1894 Missouri River Commission maps, or the 1943 maps that the Army Corps used in their reconnaissance studies for building the dam. Or you can take a look at the dam being built in 1952, or you can look at photos from 1995, or some really nice photography that the Army Corps flew in 2017 with 3-inch resolution. So what if you want to download the data? Well, it's similar to the Lidar Map Service. You can click on the green download arrow, select whether you want the original photos with the fiducial marks and borders from the 9-inch photos or the clip versions. Either button will download newer data that's already edge matched, and that's the only data that's available there. It's not clipped. You'll get a list on the left side of the screen, just like the LiDAR downloads. You can download by link, or you can download using the FTP site. It's all available for download immediately as soon as you make a selection. We're not doing zip and ship. It's ready to go as soon as you pick out your data, and there are no limits for how much you can select to get downloading. So this is something that's relatively new that I had mentioned with our drone photography. Here you'll see flood photography from Pembina, North Dakota during the 2011 flooding season. What we've done is we've added in our drone photography from across the state. In this case, we can compare a previous year's photography with photography that we might have collected yesterday. It's really quick for looking at fast changing conditions where regular air photo collections can't be made due to contracts or weather. It also makes it easy to share this data with others. So how do you see the drone footage? Well, click on the green download arrow and select either of the download buttons, and you'll get your links again. But this time, if you click on the link to view the footage, you'll get the video of the footage. You can also right click on the footage and download the file to your own machine. So in this way, you can actually compare things that you're seeing in the drone footage with historical photography. And a lot of times we know what the gauge heights were when the older photography was flown. So it gives you a better idea of what's going on the ground fairly quickly. So in summary, we keep our services as simple as possible. We don't use usernames or passwords. We don't have you waiting for emails to notify you of availability or waiting for data to be zipped up. There's no limits on what you can download. It's all ready for download as soon as you make your selection. So if you're familiar with the service, you can be downloading your data within a few minutes. 20,000 tiles of LiDAR or one tile takes about the same amount of time to queue up and start downloading. We preserve data that was getting fragile, and we revived data collected decades ago and are making them probably more useful and certainly more accessible than they were when they were first collected. We used long-time industry standards, so you don't have to use special software to view the imagery and maps. Download to any computer and they'll open with the software on your machine, except for maybe the LiDAR data. These services save an incredible amount of time for our agency personnel to quickly look up something. I know the general public and federal and state agencies are using our services as well, and I get calls from all over the nation from people that are using these services as well when they're doing business in North Dakota. We've identified and acquired thousands of more photos. More LiDAR is coming. Our water data is updated daily. Agencies like the NRCS have partnered with us in buying LiDAR and providing data and personnel to help us out because they've come to rely on our services on a regular basis. We use them everywhere, as I've mentioned before, in all of our divisions for regulatory issues, permitting, dam safety, water modeling, surveying, and even defending our case in litigation. Here's a good example of how far we have yet to go. I showed you the Air Force photos around Fargo earlier. Here's all 70,000 of them in our basement. And here's what we've got scanned and in the system so far. So there's a ton of work to do yet and a lot more useful information to get into the system. So the last service, trying to recover from a cold, so maybe I'll get through this one without coughing on you. The last service I'll talk about is our Risk Assessment Map Service. This service was developed in response to a legislative query in regards to our relationship with FEMA and their flood mapping efforts. We've included regulatory flood insurance rate map information, and these show flood zones, cross sections, base flood elevations, all laid out in the best or newest of aerial photography and our LiDAR derived shaded relief. We have base level engineering and models that were developed statewide by FEMA based on our LiDAR data. New FEMA guidance was used to create consistent 2D models and floodplains with multiple regression models to articulate risk. So here's an example of the base level flooding or base level engineering floodplains found by clicking on the BLE tab at the top. Below are buttons to download the data in the models, print a map for your insurance agent, or to print a LiDAR for LOMA certification letter that will tell FEMA that you're getting your elevations from data that they approve of and actually paid for a good chunk of it. Now watch, there's a little target symbol near the center of the screen, and you can watch as we raise the floodwaters through the different years. Here we have the 4% annual chance of a flood, like also some people would call it a 25-year flood, 50-year flood, 100-year flood, 500-year flood. We also added a section where you can compare these annual percentage chances to one another. So you can combine 2 or 3 or 4 of these, overlay them to see what the differences are. And I'll warn you that the colors are bright, but we needed the contrast to easily discern between the layers. So here we're comparing the 10%, 2%, and 0.2% chances of flooding in a year. We can also use this service to assess a property, and since this is public facing, you as a private citizen have the ability to put in your address and assess this for yourself. So here, if you're fortunate to live in one of the half dozen areas where FEMA firm maps have been developed, these are the officially modeled scenarios for your location. But what if you don't live in one of the half dozen areas where these maps have been generated? That's where the BLE models come into play. They are models after all, and like all models, they're not going to be perfect, but they do provide some idea of risk. So by entering your address information into the property tab, the map will zoom to your location anywhere in the state. You can select the flood scenario of your choice, in this case a 1% chance, also known as a 100-year flood, and view the results. Here's the 0.2% chance. This is showing the 0.2% chance, along with the house information showing what data it was derived from and the min, max, and average ground elevations closest to the house. Of course, you could also use the info button to click around the house to get elevations as well. We also added hydrologic hazards and warnings, as we wanted this service to be all-encompassing. So here we can see we get a live NOAA NextRad radar feed for North Dakota. Using the info button, we can click on the map for current warnings, and on the left we can see what the warning declaration is for. The cool thing is that we've got warnings and radar for the whole US, so it didn't take much of an effort to make it available everywhere. So if you zoom out on our service, you can see if your trip to the Gulf Coast today will be a wet one, or if your sailboating off Hawaii is safe to do right now. You'll also have access to the flood outlook warnings, and this was quite a dull day in North Dakota with a small blip in north central South Dakota. Or you can use the info button again, and you can check the river gauges across the state and actually across the nation, just like the other warnings. So your info button is your friend. You can click on one of the gauges. It'll come back with the information. You can even link to the live hydrograph provided by NOAA on their website. How about if you're concerned about how much water is in the snowpack in your watershed or basin? Our surveyors take snow samples every spring to contribute to this map showing the snow water equivalent. And we also provide flood insurance application aids to hopefully make your life a little easier at a stressful time. We provide direct links to the FEMA Mapping Center. The engineering models and data for the BLE are downloadable for any location in the state. You can create a quick and dirty map of your situation to print out for your insurance agent. And as I mentioned before, the Lidar for Loma certificate letter to assure everyone that your data is being provided by FEMA approved data sets. And as a side note, there is a current FEMA risk map effort in place to partner the Water Commission with the South Dakota DOT pooled fund solicitation study to complete a flood frequency analysis in the Midwest to address potential non-stationary annual peak flow records. Other partners in the effort include the Illinois DOT, the Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin DOTs, the state of Nebraska, the USGS, NOAA, FEMA, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm sure we'll be adding data from these studies as soon as it becomes available. So that's it for my blithering today. I know it was probably like drinking water from a fire hose, and I expect questions. So I would encourage you to call me if you have any questions about what we're doing or how these services work. And I'd be happy to help you get started.
All right, well, thank you. That was a very informational presentation, Rob. I know I was definitely unaware of the vast amount of data that is available to us out there through your website, and we'll be checking that out. So we did have one question for you, Rob. The question states, how many employees work on the mapping projects?
Well, if you're talking every day, it's basically me and our primary programmer who takes care of a lot of the server end things and some of the programming. I put the map services together, arrange the data, all that kind of stuff. The guy that I showed in the GLO presentation, Lee Krein, he did the vast majority of the work on the survey stuff. He was a surveyor, so he had a vested interest in trying to make sure all the best information was available. I've had a couple of interns here and there, but I would say there have probably been no more than a half dozen people involved with this over the last 15 to 20 years.
Perfect, thank you. Well, not looking like we have too many more questions for you. Just want to say thanks for the great presentation. And like I said, I know there's one comment here saying, and no idea beyond the general map service that is all this incredible information is available to us. So, and they can just reach out by contacting your email there if anybody has any questions. Okay. All right, so seeing no further. Oh, can I ask you one more question, Rob, that popped up?
Sure.
Okay, so another question is, do you use specific GIS applications to collect your data?
No, not for collection. I mean, I probably need a little clarification on that. Not really, no. Basically, for a lot of it is scanners. We put in GPS data. Of course, the Lidar data is collected remotely by aircraft, but nothing really specialized, pretty much standard industry software, tools, equipment.
Okay. Sure. Looks like that's about it.
Ethan, we have one more question.
Okay. Oh, yep, there's one. So another question is, do you have an estimated date for the James River PH8 QL2?
Actually, a portion of that should be delivered here in the next week. The northern portion in Cavalier, Towner counties, that should be delivered in the next week. We had a lot of problems collecting this data for the whole basin. We had too much snow, we had too much water, we had too many crops standing over previous years, but this fall we made a lot of progress. We got about 15,000 square miles of LiDAR in the can, and then we ran into some problems with flight restrictions over the Devil's Lake area. But we worked out some deals with the National Guard. They'll let us fly our planes, and actually tomorrow I'm supposed to have a meeting to start coordinating efforts to maybe start collecting that last chunk in the Devil's Lake region. I can send out a status map. You can take a look at our status map, but we've collected the whole Red River Valley. That's our priority right now for developing in that. It typically takes 90 days for the contractor to develop the data, another 90 days to do the QA/QC. So in about 6 months, I would guess by the end of the year, we'll start seeing more of that data roll in. There is a phase 9 James River collect to the west of the phase 8. We had contract problems on that, but the contractor trusted us enough, and they actually collected about 67% of that contract last fall as well. So we're going to be flooded with LiDAR data here in the next year or so.
Perfect. And it looks like we had one more question pop up for you. How far do the historical plot maps date back to?
The GLO plats, they will go back to the 1870s. I can't remember if there are any that go into the 1860s or not, but basically the middle of the 1800s is some of the earliest stuff.
Okay. Sure enough, looks like not seeing any more questions at this moment, so